Welcome, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Stormy Heller, the Director of Marketing here at Tracker, and we're here to discuss a topic that's crucial for everyone in the staffing industry: 4 ways staffing firms are falling behind and how you can get back on top. In a rapidly changing landscape, staying ahead of the curve is more important than ever. Today, we're going to explore the key challenges that are holding staffing firms back and provide actionable strategies to overcome them. We brought two of our rock stars with us today, Michael Williams and Freddie Dillon, who you've already met. And they're going to share some of their insights into how you can stay on top.
What's the number one observations that you've seen heading into this webinar?
Yeah, well, let's dive in. So, I would say right now for all that are listening, I think, let's just start with what I think, mutually agreed upon, which is number one, which is there's a tremendous number of tech traps out there. But there's so many grabs right now, what I guess think what we would call tech traps. And I think the first would be just really the concept of overbuying. So do you want to jump in and just share a little bit about what you've seen on this whole, FOMO overbuying side of things?
Yeah, like you said, there are a couple different ways: overbuying, underbuying, and then you need to find the middle ground between the two.
Yeah.
So what we find is you talk to a lot of people who want to go out and buy every new shiny toy. It's like the dad that has to have every new gadget for Christmas, and then it ends up sitting on a shelf for half the year.
Yep.
I was working with a company recently, and they were asking about who we integrated with and then what tools we integrated with, and they listed off their tech stack, and they asked me about three of these specifically, and I got to looking at these companies, and they do remarkably three of very similar things, and we had some of that native technology inside of Tracker. So I think that people get caught up in seeing, especially with like AI today, as it's a
That's a
growing
buzzword.
industry.
That's
Yeah,
a
it's a
buzzword.
buzzword. And don't get me wrong, we're vested heavily in AI at Tracker, but there's going to be tools out there that just look really cool, but then when it comes to practical usage, um, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. It's going to require them to open up a new tool, do manual entry somewhere else, and then you have your recruiters or your salespeople, your back office people, whoever it may be. They're going to be working out of 5 different screens, transferring data manually between those platforms. So, I think that you need to really take a step back and look at who's going to be using that tool on a daily basis, and then get the leaders in those groups involved, your best recruiters. Get your back office people on there, or talk to your sales team, because me and you both, as sales, as is in our blood. Another thing we don't like to do is update notes. So you need to understand if your team's actually going to use it. Another thing is, how much are you spending on this stuff? I mean, technology is not cheap. It's it can take a toll on your business when you have 19 different tools, and you're spending more on technology than if going out and hiring another recruiter or an admin would have made more of a difference than trying to solve all the problems in the world with a new shiny toy. And then just back to like just overwhelming employees. How
Yeah.
many tools do you have them learning on a regular basis?
Yeah, I mean, the big picture is technology is supposed to be a tool that makes everybody faster, more efficient, and that helps. But when we overbuy technology, one of the things that it does is it slows us down. We can't do our job because we have to do more training. We have to do another integration between two more pieces of technology. So overbuying is, I would say, just, it can be one of the biggest deficits that you accidentally find yourself in that situation. But on the flip side, underbuying technology, I would say, is a radically, maybe the biggest challenge that staffing firms face, because a staffing firm 40, 30, 20, 10, 5 years ago could get away with a very minimalistic tech stack. Now, I think, we're technologists, so from our perspective, the idea is you need and want technology, but you also want a lean and efficient tech stack. So if you underbuy, one of the things that you have to be thinking about is, what are my competitors doing? What do they have? And are they going to outpace me over the next 6, 9, 12 months simply because they have technology that I should have invested in? I think that's a big piece. I also think that analysis by paralysis, or wait, no, got it backwards. Paralysis by analysis is a huge component part too, because you can say, look, I know I need to buy tech, but I don't know what to buy. There's too many tools out there in the market. So let's put together a subcommittee and let's start talking about it and analyzing it. And usually, I mean, there's number one, nobody wants to do that because they hate to be on another committee. Also, it takes a long time to do that. And there are people out there that actually have a good understanding of all the tools on the market versus asking a team to start from scratch and analyze them. So, you said it right at the beginning of this topic, which is there has to be a middle ground between overbuying and underbuying. And I guess my advice would be lean into professional resources in the industry and ask questions and learn from what they're willing to share. I don't think that means hiring an outside consulting firm.
Yeah.
God forbid, that sometimes that is the most costly and slowest process ever. But I think that there's ways to lean into experts. And before we transition topics here, Freddie, I found that anytime somebody says, "Hey, could I ask you a favor?" or could I ask you a question? Typically, I'm inclined to say, "Sure."
Yeah.
And I found that no matter how big, successful, popular, accomplished somebody is, if you just ask one or two questions, you can also often get a yes from them, and they'll share their opinion with you. So
Yeah.
I would lean into that as people start to evaluate their technology and
Well,
whether
and
they're over or underbought.
Well, and think about it, as staffing and recruiting professionals, we as well as much as anyone know that we need to leverage our networks. So, maybe not somebody that's your direct competitor, or maybe it is and you're friends with them, but reach out to them, say, what are you using? What are you using that's working well? There's groups that you can use on LinkedIn and things like that where you can go in and ask people opinions of things. You need to look at things when you're kind of playing that line between overbuying and underbuying. You really need to look at a tool from all angles. So you need to look at it from the cost perspective. You need to look at it as, what's this accomplishing for me? Is this something that's just going to make something look cool, or it just seems like it'd be a nice to have? Or is this something that's going to actually save my recruitment team time? Is this going to save me time? Because at the end of the day, the tools that we want to leverage the most, or that do get leveraged the most, and the end goal is to save time, drive efficiencies, and make more placements. And which, the three of those combined, drives more profit, drives more revenue, and allows you to, hire more, buy more, whatever you want to do. But you got to start at a core of those
Yeah.
three topics.
Yeah, agreed. Well, hey, so we're here to talk about the top 4 ways, that we've seen staffing firms be challenged or fall down or come up short. And so topic number 1 is just all around the idea of technology. Make sure you're not going to overbuy it, make sure you're not underbuying it. And, it's really about chatting with people about finding that middle ground.
And
So,
before we move on to the next topic, I will say the other thing that a pitfall of this one, is that you need to regularly evaluate the technology that you have already purchased
yeah.
and really put it to task up against other technologies in the industry, that might not be, that might be the new shiny toy in the room, and make sure it's working for you.
Absolutely. All right, so on to the second area that I think is oftentimes a challenge, and I think we came up with this cute little title called marketing myopia. And so, for those who get nearsighted, farsighted, mixed up, the concept of being myopic is that you are nearsighted, which means you only see right in front of you right now, and you're not able to see clearly what's far away. And so the idea here is that if you're so focused on today's fire, if you're focused on the urgent, okay, you might make it through to the end of the day, but you're really putting yourself in a challenging situation as a company to be successful by the end of the quarter, to be successful 6, 9, and 12 months out. And so I think what you and I have seen a lot of is that there are companies out there that they say, yeah, we're in staffing and recruitment, but they haven't clearly defined and articulated their niche, their identity, or I would say really who they're trying to serve. So there's so many slang terms that you can use, like, hey, what's your IDC, your ideal customer profile, or ICP, your ideal
Yeah.
customer profile. But really, it goes back to both in life and in business. We should all know ourselves. Who are we? What are we all about? Where are we really strong? Where are we really good? And are we leaning into that? And so, if somebody says, oh, yeah, we do all industries, all verticals. All right, great. You're a generalist, and that could really fit for some. But you know
Yeah.
what? Somebody who I meet and comes along and like can speak my language about the things that I'm really dialed into. So if I focus on finance and accounting, I should really lean into that. So I think the big piece of advice we want to give here is don't be afraid to just clarify for yourself and others who you are. And then the marketing piece is communicate that, share that, lean into
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And I mean, honestly, one example could be leaning into your industry experience. If you're into tech staffing, you could cite the fact that your company wasn't started by recruiters; they were started by, a group of Java developers. Much like Tracker, we got our start in the recruiting industry, but we're a software company. So you really lean into that industry expertise, but then you also, what you said earlier about the generalist, it's not a bad thing to be a generalist. Some companies are very much looking for that, the one-stop shop type of thing, where, you don't have to handle all these different relationships when you need different types of employees. But then, certain companies would want you to, have that niche. Do you have a network of, thousands and thousands of, that specific profession? So you just have to find, what defines you as a brand and really lean into that. Is it, in temporary staffing, you could really lean into the speed of hire. But in an executive recruitment firm, you're going to want to really rely on, the quality. Because when you're recruiting for higher level positions, it's not necessarily I can get you somebody in a few weeks. It's more, I'm going to get the guy that's going to really make a difference in your organization.
yeah. So I think the big picture here is, when it comes to who you are as a company, we want to encourage you to know your niche, to know your identity, to know your value prop, and to market and share that via your network, via technology. And there's more we can go into on that one, but I want to keep us rolling because I want to honor everybody's time. And so, I think the third challenge, Freddie, that we've seen over and over again, we labeled it the client conundrum. And, I think the idea here is, everyone who works in staffing, owns a staffing company, has customers. But what do you know about those customers? What do those customers know about you? And so really, we kind of smush these two ideas together here, which is you can look at your customers as transactional, or you can look at them as relational. And I think the big encouragement here is to be relational. Transactions, in sports, winning cures all ills.
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
matter what, like you can have drama in, on the sideline, drama in the dugout, you can have drama anywhere, but if you win, it's going to be all right. And
Yeah.
I think what we've seen is it doesn't matter what company it is, at some point in time, there's going to be a challenge in the relationship. There's going to be a problem that comes up. And honestly, people will mess up, mistakes will be made. And if you have been a transactional type of, I would say, business acquaintance with your customers, then that's going to be a really big issue. But if you've
Yeah.
been relational with them, then I believe you can either go to them or they can come to you and just say the question, ask the question, how do we solve this? How do we
Yeah.
work through this? And
Yeah.
so, as far as attracting, retaining, and maintaining clients, be real, be relational. And we start to backtrack. It goes back to know who you are and communicate that to them. And sometimes it might be a reason that a client leaves because
Yeah.
you're too focused on something that's not them. But a lot of the time, it's going to be like, oh, wow, I really understand them. I'm going to lean into this. And so, today everyone wants new business, more
Yep.
business. How do you do that? I would argue that it's done through authenticity and relationships.
Yeah. And I mean, I think you need to take a consultative approach when it comes to your clients. Now, what you said earlier, results are what matter at the end of the day. But there's so many staffing and recruiting firms out there, and is the competition is so intense, that you want to lean into building those relationships, because when it comes to when it's a debate or a coin flip, you've built that relationship with them and they want to work with you. I've made the joke, but it's a funny analogy, that you're kind of dating your clients and building those relationships. You don't want to you don't want to leave the date and send that person 30 texts before they get home and annoy them to death. But you do want to work up to the point where you have that relationship where you can be on a texting basis. Like, working in sales, I'm not going to text somebody while I'm in the B2B side of things. It's a lot different when you're reaching out to candidates. But you want to build that relationship to a point where you can text that person, or you can just pick up and call them at any time or shoot them an email. So build
No,
up that relationships, build up, and then understand what's keeping them up at night. Is it, what's wrong with the employees that they do have?
yeah, Freddie, you just triggered a thought. I was having a conversation with the CEO of a very large company yesterday, and he said, "Look, I don't get on a call unless with my sales team unless the deal's at least $100,000. Like like it's not worth my time." And so he said, "However, I don't care how big or small the customer is. If we, as a company, do not respond back to their email within 20 minutes." Or if they call our phone number, and we still have a phone number, he said, and we don't pick up within 3 rings, I want them to text me personally, regardless of how big they are, because I'm going to, number one, find out, what do they need and how do we address it? And then I'm going to make sure that our system is working the way that it should work. And so, it really does go back to being relational and being authentic. And if this
Yeah.
guy can have that mindset, and he's never too busy for a customer that has a need, then whoa, I think all of us can kind of stop feeling so self-important or so busy and realize that our clients are the reason we are in business. The
Yeah.
reason so many people can draw a paycheck and make a living and make their dreams come true each week is because we have clients. So we need to be real and authentic and make sure those relationships are done right.
Well, I think a good point too is that you have to make yourself easy to work with. How do you offer your clients the ability to communicate with you? How do they, how when they need something, how fast are you responding to them? Do you offer some sort of portal or something for them to review candidates in? If you send them an email, do they have to go to 18 different screens to see these different resumes and synopsises of these candidates? So there's just lots of different ways that you can go about trying to make that client journey, not to use another buzzword like customer journey, client journey, but to make that as easy as possible. Because let's not forget, the reason that they're using you in the first place is that these hiring managers have day jobs. And when you're fighting the competitions, you're not just fighting competing staffing and recruiting firms, you're also fighting the idea that they can do it themselves. And you don't want them to get the idea that, oh, I can do, we're going to try this on our own. So you have to continually show your value and build strong relationships with these people.
Yeah. All right. So just as a quick review, because I'm a bit like, to me, I need to be able to like have my takeaways. I look back like, how are staffing firms falling down? So far we've touched on the fact that you can underbuy or overbuy technology. People can have no idea who you are. And so super important to know your niche and define your identity, to define your value prop and to communicate that out well. And then as far as, your relationships with clients go, be relational, not transactional.
Yeah.
And really, transitioning to the fourth and really final area that I think you and I, as we were talking, preparing for today, felt that we've really seen companies fall short, fall down, and really they're struggling right now because they're just overwhelmed or daunted by their data.
Yeah.
So, to me, I a few different careers prior to the last 10 years that I've been in tech. And so I worked with families and kids for quite a while early on in my career. And I don't know if I came up with it on my own, but I kind of did some freestyle on a radio show I was on one time. And I shared the dating formula that I have. Like, how do you know your relationship's going to be successful? I say you take you take your age, divide it in half, and you add 7. So if you're 40 years old, divide it in half, that's 20, add 7, you'll have a successful relationship with somebody that's 27 or older, but it's not going to work any other way. So let's now parlay that and apply that to staffing and data. How in the world am I going to make this bridge? All right, let me tell you. I think the formula is 70, 10, 10, 10. When you're making decisions for your business, what are you basing those decisions on? I think 70% of what you base a decision on, the overwhelming majority of the decision, needs to be made based on analytical factors and the data that's in front of you. But that's not all, because you do have to allow for tradition. Part of the reason why a lot of companies are successful is because they've always done something. There's just been a way that they've had. And so 10% of the equation, I would say, is tradition. How have you always done it? I think another 10% in that 10, 10, 10 is the emotional component. You can make a decision based on emotion, based on like everyone here identifies with this. We should absolutely lean into that. And then the last 10, what I would say, people are leaders because there's something in their gut that's always guided them, and they're just successful over and over and over. And that could be because of habits. It could be because of a lot of things. But in the end, I really believe that gut instinct, that intuition is a big factor.
And honestly, like, people forget about that. I'm a huge baseball fan, so I make a lot of baseball references. But in the last 15 years or so, baseball has been vastly analytical about what decisions need to be made based on what. But at the end of the day, when it's game 7 and you got to put a new pitcher in, are you going to be looking at the stats, or are you going to be trusting your gut with, who's been hot lately, and just having that gut feeling, ultimately is something that you need to be able to do.
Yeah. And here's the thing. There's no magic fairy dust doesn't exist. There's no magic wand. There's no magic formula. And I think the reality is recipes or formulas, can always be tweaked. And so maybe 70, 10, 10, 10 isn't the perfect amount, but let's focus here, because we're a tech company and we're talking to people that are running companies with technology. Let's focus on the data for just a moment. no matter who you're using as your ATS and CRM provider, no matter how much data you have and how clean and hygienic it is, or how sloppy and messy and ugly your data is, ultimately, if you have the data, there's a way to slice it and dice it and look at it and use it, but you need the right tools in order to do that. And so
Yeah.
I think, when we're talking about tech tools for data analysis, number one, they need to be powerful. Number two, they need to be fast. Number three, they need to be able to do the math. And so that means, again, that they need to be powerful. And I
Yeah.
think ultimately, you need to understand what are your baseline metrics that, if you saw them, would help you make better decisions.
Yeah.
So does your
Well,
technology have a strong data analytics platform? Does it slice and dice things quickly? And does it provide for you, both from an analytical and from a visual perspective, data in a way that you can look at and be like, yeah,
yeah.
this makes sense. I can make the decision.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, and unless you have a data analyst on staff, a lot of times you can overcomplicate things and really suffer from decision paralysis based on data. So I think to your point, it's very key to come up with that core set of reports or data points, and then start putting in variables here and there, but don't try to make some complicated report about resumes submitted on Tuesdays in the summer or something like that, to kind of drive your analytics. Start with your look at what your best recruiters are doing. That's what our CEO Andy always says. Look at what your best recruiters are doing, and then you can focus on what you know and then you can compare them to who's not doing so well, and then look at what they're doing differently. And then you can use that as a building block. I think another thing that we get caught up in is, we use the term actionable insights. We've used it for a while now. And, that means taking action based on the data that you have. Now, there's two things, there's two pitfalls of this, either not doing it at all or knee jerk reactions. It could be just a changing marketplace, that, just needs to work itself out. Or you might just be having, you might have just had a bad month. But you need to be consistent, but you also need to be very thoughtful, with your changes. But when you make your changes, you need to be very deliberate, so as not to, you don't want to kind of have half the team doing one thing and half the team doing another, unless you're doing some A/B testing. You don't want to have one foot in, one foot in and one foot out, is the type of mentality that you got to make those decisions, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and it's funny. You gave me a great transition here, Freddie, which is the whole concept of change. So I know that Stormy is collecting questions for us, that people are writing in. But I've got a buddy, I won't name him, who's on the webinar right now, and I don't know if this is a legit question from him or if he's just trying to give me a softball, question to answer. But he said, talk a little bit about change management, and I think that technology change needs to be done thoughtfully and it needs to be done well. And you can
Yeah.
absolutely overwhelm your team with too much technology change. I think factors that you want to, as a leader listening to this, or as somebody who's going to bring recommendations to leadership in your company, I would argue that if you're able to simplify your tech stack and lean it down, that's better oftentimes than adding to. Now, not everybody's in the same situation, but ask the question first, is there any way for us to lean down our tech stack? And in doing so, what's going to be the requirement on the team for how many hours per week? How many months is this change going to take place? And I think that you've got to give your team 6 months a year with no interruption.
Yeah.
Um, if you start a project and you want to wrap it up, I always encourage companies, wrap your projects up by the last day in November, because once December hits, it's end of year, it's holiday season, it's family time, school vacation, school's out, prepping for the new year. There's so many things going on in
Christmas, yeah,
December. Yeah.
yeah,
So I think that you got really 11 months to work with. And the reality is during summer, a lot of times your company's not all there, because the 3 months of summer is hard to do large scale change,
yeah.
because not everyone's in the office, whether it's virtual or physical.
Yeah,
So
well,
yeah, go ahead.
I do think that there is a little bit of, variance there with the types of staffing that you do. A lot of, temporary summer help type staffing could ramp up in July and August, whereas, you know,
Yeah, great point.
as another one, another industry, like we see in like technology sales, in the vacation months, or right around Christmas time, is where we see our low points in the year. And then speaking of change management, of course, Stormy had a blog. She's always got a blog. She shared it in the chat there. So if you want to take a look at the change management blog, take a look there. I do think, though, when you're thinking about making changes, you need to start with a goal. What is your ultimate goal? And then you need to work backwards from there to kind of develop a game plan and see how that help. And then when you evaluate these tools, you have to understand how that's going to help you achieve your goals. Not just, oh, I can make more, if I do this, my recruiters can make more phone calls, or my recruiters can make more outreaches. Well, that's great, but, what's the ultimate goal? Are they going to be able to make more personalized outreaches? How is more always better? And just using the examples of outreaches here, but this can be, across, a lot of different things that you're changing within the organization. Whether that's personnel changes, whether that's, what type of, technology you use. It could be anything.
Yeah, and Freddie, one of the numbers or metrics that's always stuck in my head and that I've just seen, I'm going to say hundreds of times, has been the phrase is 3 months for 30. And that is, if you have 30 users, 30 recruiters, 30 seats, 30 users of the technology in your company, it's typically going to take 3 months from the day you sign a contract until the day that that technology is really implemented and running in your business. And it doesn't matter what
Yeah.
type of technology it is. Now, people can be like, oh no, we get people implemented in 2 weeks, or like there's
Yeah.
all, and there
So
are exceptions to the rule. But yeah, big picture, I just think that we need to be realistic and just say, from the moment you find the newest, hottest, greatest, best, whatever you're going to go for, just allow for the proper amount of change
yeah,
and adoption, and make sure, looking back, I really do believe well, no, I'm making this up, so this is a random stat I'm just making up, but I bet you 90% of C-level buyers would say, I wish we would have spent a little bit more time and money relating to training, consulting, and adoption.
yeah.
And oftentimes they just wish they would have spent 5 more hours, 10 more
Sure.
hours
We
total. Oh,
in before I was at Tracker, we used to call it like the implementation V. It kind of, when you buy a new technology, first you're going to be here, but then you're going to drop down before you can scale back up.
yeah,
It's going to take adoption. It's going to take time to get used to. Most of the time, you're not going to take off like the Kentucky Derby. You're going to have to put time and invest in training your team to be able to use the tools. You see that I've seen that with software more than anything, is when a team buys a new tool and they just dump it on them and say, like, here you go. That's why I know we provide training resources and tutorials and things like that. So just make sure that you're properly supported from, the vendor. And on top of that, make sure that you're supporting your internal employees, and you're really allowing them to use the tool to its fullest potential.
I think as a big picture review, let's just walk through it real quick. The four ways that we see companies falling down right now is around technology, either overbuying or underbuying. We want to encourage you to do an analysis of your technology. Secondly, we want to encourage you not to be short-sighted, to really to be introspective, look into yourself and understand who you are, your niche, your value prop. And then when it comes to the third topic, which is relating that to customers, to clients, so that they understand you and build that relationship, that authentic relationship with them, so that you really do know each other. And then when fourth and final way that we see companies fall down, and I think areas for improvement, and we would just say, yeah, trust your gut, lean into tradition, don't be so stoic, you have no emotion, but really drive your decisions overwhelmingly based on the historical data and the actual precedents that are happening in the context of your industry and your field, and base decisions on that.
Yeah.
And so, if those four areas are examined, I really do believe that a struggling company, especially, it's a challenging market right now. Number one thing
Yeah.
I'm hearing right now is it's a tough market. So, what would it, if you took, half a day to walk through these topics, either yourself with a piece of paper or a small exercise with your team, I could see that being a really powerful way to say, look, we've got 2 quarters left. Let's crush the end of 2024. And because of this, reflection that we've done, I think we can make some minor changes leading to maybe some bigger changes. And we can, become more successful than we are right now.